Right. This all feels a bit BBC leadership debate, doesn't it? I can reassure you I'm not going to remove any items of clothing while we're on. Thank you very much for having me here, Ollie. When Ollie asked me to chair this, I was a little bit nervous because I assumed that everybody would be a lot younger than me. And I'm now feeling a bit better because we've got a good range of ages here, and it's so important that this wonderful organisation has the support of those of us that have been around a little bit longer. The idea tonight with this little panel is just to have a bit of a chat with our influencers here about their views on some of the issues that crop up so regularly in terms of the debate. So we have, as have already been introduced, Stephen, Dominique, Esther, and Chloe. And I want to kick off just by asking about your experiences and your perspective on the situation on university campuses. And I'm going to start with Stephen, and it's slightly unfair because he's so young he hasn't actually been to university. But I do know, because I've been working with Stephen since he was, I think, 16, that actually even being at school, being a sort of slightly right-of-centre voice was quite a difficult experience. And, you know, perhaps you might like to talk a little bit about how that was.
Yeah, I mean, as Isabel rightly says, I'm only 19, I've been to university and haven't got any current plans to go. But, you know, doing my GCSEs at secondary school, at sort of, you know, doing my A-levels, you experience lots of blowback, you know, for you're having those political views. And I quite enjoyed to debate with the teachers about whatever it was, the subject of the day, whether it was, you know, voting for Jeremy Corbyn, sort of saying how much of a communist he was, or, you know, or whatever it is. And you've got to really stand up for your beliefs. And a lot of people in those situations would probably keep quiet and maybe not mention that they have those conservative views. But if one person in the class, and I love to be that person, always mentioned that, you know, sort of debated the teacher about it, whatever they're saying, their sort of left-wing bias, you experience a lot of blowback for that. And that's whether that's from members of staff within the school who say nasty comments, or whether that's sort of fellow peers and bullying. And I'm sure it's rife throughout the whole of the UK, and whatever level of education you are, you will always experience a lot of negative comments and a lot of negativity. But, you know, that's part of the course, unfortunately, of being a young conservative in 2019.
And I think it actually starts really young. I mean, my son is 11, and obviously I'm doing my very best to brainwash him. But he says that whenever they have to do some kind of exercise at school that involves looking at newspapers, guess which newspaper they're asked to read? It's always The Guardian. And, you know, he is properly trained to kick off about this, but it shouldn't be like that. They should be given a range. Dominique, what's your perspective on this?
Well, like Stephen said, it's assumed that young people have to be left-wing, and even especially for me, as someone of, you know, mixed heritage and young and a female, they look at me and they're like, you, right-wing conservative, you like Nigel Farage, you support leaving the European Union. And it really is a great shock to them. And I think that's what's so important about my role in Turning Point UK and my role on campuses, because people don't actually expect me to have the views that I have, but they also additionally don't expect me to be able to articulate my views and perhaps actually make them think. And that's what this is about. It's about making people on campus and in university think, because it's assumed that I'd think one way. It's assumed that young people follow the left. When in reality, we are the most capitalist and conservative generation there is out there. It's just we're told. Right. Yeah. It's just we're told that we mustn't be because it's this evil phenomena, when in reality we all benefit from capitalism, and we all have benefited from capitalism and the free market. And that's the message that we really want to hammer home.
Thank you. Thank you, Chloe. So have you had any personal experience of this? I know you've been standing up for all of this for a while now.
Yeah, I've been out of university a couple of years. I came here as an international student from Australia. Thank you. I'm here to help, but I wanted to help with Turning Point because I definitely experienced this kind of thing on campus. And when Turning Point launched, there were events planned at universities across the UK. And when the universities found out, they no-platformed Turning Point. And we had those events anyway, but I just thought it was really interesting. Like, what are they so afraid of? Turning Point was there to have a debate about whether capitalism or socialism was better. And I really don't think you run away from debates you think you can win. And I think that's why the left try to deplatform people like Charlie and Nigel, is because they don't have very good arguments. And so they don't engage in debate, they engage in demonization. You're young and you're not a socialist? Well, you must be a fascist, transphobe, racist, xenophobe, sexist, whatever, right? Hands up if you've been called one of those names before. Yeah, it's a pretty low bar. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's working anymore, though, because the left have cried wolf so many times. But I think the reason they do it is because they know they can't win the debate. They know that when the facts are out there, actually a lot of people realize that capitalism is much, much better for them. And so we just need to get out there and make this case.
Esther.
Yeah, my experience was a little bit different. I grew up in Ghana. I only moved to the UK when I was 14. And so moving here, it was sort of like, I became black when I moved to the UK. They were like, you're black, you're oppressed, but it's fine. We will wrap you in our warm, loving left arms. And for me, it was crazy because there was this sort of expectation of me to just become left-wing and to think a certain way. And for a large part of my experience in the UK, I did follow that. I did think, oh yeah, I grew up in a third world country. I have to know what oppression feels like, and I have to follow that sort of rhetoric. And then I think that it came a point. I went to Bristol University, which is probably one of the most left-wing in the country.
Which university?
Bristol University.
Right, I was there
and
too.
I think one of the biggest. Thank you. One of the biggest turning points for me was how patronizing at one point it became. There was no sort of room for me to think otherwise. It came to a point that I was like, do you want people with a voice? Do you want people that are individual thinkers that think, what is an economic system that's actually going to benefit me and my community, or do you just want me to be part of groupthink because of the color of my skin? And that's where I really had enough. And I'm probably the worst enemy because they're like, yeah, we're fighting racism and this, and I'm like, on behalf of all black people, no, thank you. You are ruining it. And yeah, I get a lot of abuse because of that, because it's like, who are you as a black person to say that? I'm like, no, I'm actually telling you that you are making it worse for minorities. You are patronizing us, you are not giving us a voice, and you're not giving us space to be individual thinkers. And so I get a lot of abuse for it, but I kind of love it because I love the fact that I am their worst nightmare.
Thank you. Keep it. So, Chloe, I'm interested to what extent you think Corbyn and Momentum are responsible for this, because this is actually a relatively new thing. I mean, I was also at Bristol. I don't remember any of this culture when I was at university. It feels to me as if this has crept up on us in the last few years and is very, very much associated with the arrival of Corbyn and the Momentum movement. What do you think about that? Do you blame Momentum for this, or was it there anyway? I mean, why are young people so left-wing right now?
Well, it's hard to compare because obviously we haven't been around as long as some of the people in this room, so we don't know what university was like back in the day. But I know that universities have always been considered left-wing, but there's something different about what's happening now.
It's as if it's
very
legitimised,
hostile.
I think.
Exactly, it's very, very hostile. And I think the reason why so many young people are left-wing is because it's difficult to see the wrongs in the world and suffering in the world and not want to do something about it.
Right.
And so they're told that socialism is the answer. This is the compassionate way to help people with their lives. And they might not have heard the other side of the argument. The other side of the argument is Venezuela, the Soviet Union, North Korea. Socialist, far-left, authoritarian governments do not alleviate suffering, they cause suffering. And this is why I think that right-wing people are no-platformed, because if we go out there and tell everyone about what's happening in Venezuela, what's happening in socialist countries, the entire Momentum, thing falls apart. their entire worldview falls
Yeah.
apart. They
I
can't
mean-
accept that it's real socialism.
This goes right to the top, doesn't it? I don't know how many of you saw David Miliband this morning on Good Morning Britain, and he was talking about his refugee organisation and how enormous it is, and the millions and millions and tens of millions of pounds that it makes and that it has. And I just thought there's something really insidious about this. Everybody is thinking this is all lovely, wonderful for the good, and actually there are people making a lot of money out of these beliefs. Dominique, what's your perspective?
I think it's privilege, to be honest. I think it's the fact that we are the most privileged generation that there is. We don't really know what suffering is. We don't really know about tyrannical or authoritarian regimes. We're in a world of Uber, of McDonald's, of convenience, and that's why we assume that the thing that provides us with the most must be the problem. Of course, everything being free and everything being doled out to everyone sounds like the perfect and the nice option. But in reality, it has the opposite effect. So I really think it's because we're really not used to that kind of suffering that we reject the thing that has benefited us the most.
So one of the things that worries me, and I would be interested in your perspective on this, Stephen, is there are a number of my Conservative Party friends who will privately say that they actually think that this country needs a dose of Corbyn, that they think that 5 years of Corbyn will correct this situation. I think that is incredibly alarming, and they will never say it publicly. But you should know that that is what some people in the Conservative Party privately say. What do you think, Stephen? Would 5 years of Corbyn sort us out?
We'll do exactly the opposite. I think that the Conservative Party, I know there are a lot of Conservatives in the room and they may not like me saying this, but the Conservative Party, the only way to solve the problems that we have in the UK is for the Conservative Party to be completely destroyed.
Wow.
And I'm not ashamed of being part of the Brexit Party. I helped run some of the digital campaign. And I think that, look, the only way that we're going to solve this...
I think he deserves a clap for that, by the way. This guy ran the Brexit Party's digital campaign.
Look, I think that what the Brexit Party has done and what Nigel Farage has done has caused such a shock to the Conservative Party that hopefully we will leave the European Union on the 31st of October, and hopefully the Conservative Party will start being conservative again.
So I'd like to talk to you all about how you came to be involved with Turning Point UK and how you hope that you can contribute to what the organisation is trying to achieve. I think there's so much potential here, but it absolutely needs advocates like you to really get a hearing, I think. Let's start with Esther, because I know you're quite sort of fairly new, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. I'm quite new to the organisation. It was part of my New Year's resolution, oddly enough. It was one of those things I was like, get part of an organisation that I really believe in. It was one of those things I wanted to do for 2019, and it really just happened out of the blue. What I do want to achieve is I want to be the voice that tells the left to stop being so patronizing to people that don't form part of their groupthink or that don't fall in line. I want them to understand that they're actually doing, especially minority groups, a lot of harm by sort of coddling us in this actually dangerous ideology. And what frustrates me and even offends me the most is they use sort of, and I don't want to make it about race, but it is, because they use sort of minority groups to sort of peddle their message that's actually more damaging to us. I always say that I grew up in a country where people didn't have access to sort of the NHS and education and all these like sort of free universal education and all these kind of resources. And that doesn't make them less human. And, we never start from a point of gratitude. We never say, oh, let's be grateful that the UK has all these resources at our disposal. Thanks to the taxpayer, let's start there and then let's see how we can make it better. That's not what the left does. That's not what the Labour Party peddles. They're always saying, oh, we deserve this. It's our human right to have this, and we don't talk about sort of hard work or how to get there. So I really want to be a voice that says, actually, you can't use us as this sort of image for your backward ideology. And let's actually have a conversation if you really want to help us. If you don't, then, step aside.
Thank you. Chloe, a couple of things. First of all, to talk about what you will do for Turning Point, but also how do you think we get over this idea that the left has a kind of monopoly on kindness and empathy? Because it feels to me as if you're anything right of centre, you're demonised, as if you can't possibly want the best for the most possible people. How do we get over that, do you think?
We need to stop making arguments with so many statistics, and facts are really important. But the reason we're here tonight is because we also really care about other people. And we kind of assume in a debate with the left, I do quite a few of these broadcast things, and they just think that they're right. They just know that they're right. And they think that you're evil. And you sit there trying to talk about unemployment stats or economics. It doesn't work. We've got to get a bit of passion back. And I think we're going to win this. I'm here helping Turning Point because we're going to win this. We're going to win. I mean, look, we're winning in a lot of ways. In Australia, we had a shock election result with Scott Morrison. The low tax party got through. Brexit was a shock result. The European elections, that was another, fantastic result. Donald Trump going in and cutting taxes. I mean, we're winning in many ways. So we just need to have confidence and to know that the ideas that we believe in are right. We need to sit in that chair with the left-wing person thinking they are so wrong and they're in the wrong and I'm in the right, because I don't think we have that confidence anymore.
Right. And I think we also need to not fall into their traps of being too predictable. So I think one of the reasons the Brexit Party got off to such a fabulous start was the diversity of its candidates. It had a fantastically talented and very different range of candidates to what a lot of our critics would have expected. Dominique, what do you think we can do on the right to catch attention in a way that is not expected by our critics?
I think the key thing is to make it more relatable, and that starts with having young people that aren't necessarily from a stereotypical right-wing background, but espouse the same ideas that can hit home with people from a working-class background or hit home with people from a minority background. I'm personally from both a working-class and minority background. And I'm not conservative despite the fact that I'm working-class and a minority. I'm that because I'm working-class and a minority. Yeah. I know the meaning of hard work. My mum's a shining example of that, of her setting up her own business from nothing and working her hardest to buy her own house and provide for her children. That's why I think the way that I think, and that's why it's so important.
Right, Stephen, I am going to give you the last word because I'm under very strict instructions to keep this for 20 minutes because everybody's hungry. What would you like to add?
Well, I think we have to make it acceptable to young people to be conservative. And I think it's fantastic that you've got different voices who aren't necessarily, as you say, the most stereotypical young conservatives. And I think that you have to make it a broad church. And if we have people who aren't necessarily the normal sort of stale, pale, male politicians making the same old boring arguments about taxes, etc., you've got to get to the emotion of it. And you've got to say, well, actually, being young and a conservative isn't necessarily a polar opposite, but in fact, it's the complete opposite to that. To be young conservative is completely natural. And in fact, we are the people who are compassionate. We are the people who believe in freedom. We are the people who believe in your rights as an individual. And I think that we don't make that case enough. And I think that Turning Point UK has a fantastic opportunity to make that case to millions of young people in the UK who currently don't have a home.
Thank you. So I hope that's left everybody feeling a bit more optimistic, because I honestly think with ambassadors like this, we can get somewhere, but we need to multiply you. You have to have clones and some. I'm going to finish up now because we're on to the next stage. I don't know whether it's dinner or what's happening. It's dinner now. And after that, we've got more exciting things coming up. Thank you.